Welcome back, and you're watching continuing coverage now of the 2023 presidential and parliamentary elections in Nigeria. The process is not over. Election is still taking place in a number of polling units across the country. And of course, there have been reports of delays of the arrival of INEC officials and, of course, materials at some polling unit. Now, you would think that with the rescheduling of the election in these polling units, that the situation would be better, that INEC officials would arrive in good time. But unfortunately, some of the reports we're getting are not so positive, that INEC officials and their materials arrived quite late at some of the polling units, so which means voting might extend beyond the official time now in these polling units. But we've since been joined by PT2, who is a political affairs analyst, and of course he went around to observe the election. Achike, thank you very much for coming on the program. You went around yesterday, and of course you must have gotten reports from across the country and all of that. What do you make of this process?
Yeah, well, of course, well, there are different ways of looking at this, and there is the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think the good is that part of the good is that people turned out. Of course, it is debatable and maybe too early.
Highly debatable.
Yes, yeah, too early, because in some of the past elections, exactly, some of the past elections, I mean, that's how you begin to, attribute a very high, turnouts, not having covered everywhere, just like you have said, and then ultimately at the end of the day, you find out that it was generally low. But at least from the ones that we saw some, I saw some level of enthusiasm. I saw a lot of voters, young people, old people, maybe not so much in terms of the numbers of old people. A few disabled, INEC has special provisions for them too at the polling unit. But essentially young people, I saw a lot of determination by people to want to cast their votes. And in some of the places I went to, I mean, essentially, virtually all of them were relatively peaceful. We didn't have issues, perhaps because maybe they are not the volatile areas. Obviously, they are flashpoints. If you look at the history of voting, in Lagos State, but I think that one of the things that characterized this election are logistic issues.
Big time.
Yeah, obviously, INEC has some explanations to do, because you cannot collect 350 billion naira, and then not be held accountable. We have to ask questions. It's our responsibility to ask questions. It is for them to tell us why this happened. In places like the Southeast, we can try to understand that maybe because of the peculiar security situation. And talking about the Southeast, there are some positives there too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the turnout from what we have seen, the turnout quite despite the threats from
it's amazing.
Separatist
it was amazing.
Yes.
And this is what I have always said. Look, yes, it is not as if they are not bad state actors operating in the Southeast. Some of them come outside of the Southeast. Some of them are operating within in the Southeast, itself, come from the Southeast. But I have always maintained that they do not have capacity to cause any serious disruption in the electoral process. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the personnel, they don't have the logistics, they don't have the numbers to be able to cause this. But what they do is that they carry out some high profile, violent, incidences, just to put fear in the people. And so that magnifies what they do in the Southeast, and the people are terrorized as a result of that. But when people come out, and we saw that also even in the Anambra State election, where the governorship election, where Soludo was elected as governor, we also saw that lots of threat, and then not being able to back up that threat because people turned out in their numbers. So I think that is part of the positive. Though there are also some areas in the Southeast that were also declared security areas, that special, provision had to be made for security. So by and large, if you look at, I think the election in many parts, you were marred by logistic challenges. We saw President Goodluck Jonathan.
Are you surprised that this logistics challenge would happen after all the assurances given by the INEC chairman?
Yes, I would say so. And look, we have always tried to carry the can for INEC. For INEC, provide excuses for them when we have this kind of failures. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But the reality is that we've gotten to a level where we can no longer afford not to call them out. We have to call them out, and we must call them out for what has happened. If this is the first time they're organizing a general election, we'd say, okay, let's cut them some slack. But this is how many general elections down the line, and we are still having the same logistic issues. In fact, it would even appear that perhaps this particular logistic situation is even worse than what we had in 2019. But then, we cannot say definitively or make definitive conclusion until all the data, out there comes in from every part of the country. Then once we're able to do that, then we'll begin to put percentages in terms of the level of defectiveness in the process itself. Whether it is 5% failure, 10% failure, and all that, then it is at that level that we can say no. Even the beavers itself. Look, in the last...
what would be your observations on the beavers?
Yeah, I think the major problem we are having with beavers, don't forget that they did the mock accreditation exercise, which went well, successfully. But then again, they say the sweetness of the pudding is in the testing. So this is the big one, and it would appear that, of course, in some places the beavers worked. Some worked fast.
In most places.
Yes, exactly.
In some places slow.
Exactly. Some places, slow. But I think what became the major problem was the inability to transmit the results via the IREV, and that is a key, opponent of what the beavers machine is supposed to do. I remember the INEC chairman at the National Stakeholders meeting in Abuja saying emphatically that there was going to be translation of results from the polling units immediately, and not doing that also raises concern. And I can tell you, because I had the opportunity to speak with a former rec, and he was emphasizing on the need to have these results uploaded at the polling units, that if we don't do that and it gets to the word, where you have a larger number, that all kinds of things would happen or was likely going to happen at that level when they are collecting. So that once civil society and Nigerians can insist that these results must be uploaded, then part of the problem would be resolved. But it must never get to the words under any circumstance. And I mean, being a former rec, you must know what is, talking about. And besides, apart from that, is the fact that, don't forget at a time that some big wigs within the APC had questioned the capacity of the beavers in terms of its ability, network issues, and all that. And then the response from INEC was that they had tried the beavers in very remote areas, even in the seas, within Port Harcourt, and they worked. And they worked. So why will it not work in other places? But we are talking at the metropolis. In many parts of the country, they couldn't upload. So it causes, let me say, it will cause some level of a concern.
Dio, don't you think probably the INEC itself was just over-optimistic when it comes to the beavers, that that with technology, especially in a society like this where technology is not fully developed, that you just don't get over-optimistic and over-promise on a device like the beavers?
INEC had to do that to inspire confidence in us. How does it go ahead to inspire confidence in the electorate, in its technology, if it doesn't give assurances of its integrity? And that's why they carried out the mock accreditation. It worked relatively
and they used
well.
They used it during the Osun and the Osun election, the Ekiti election. I think,
they absolutely did. And even though that case is still in court and the jury is still out, it seems that the beavers acquitted itself admirably in Osun State, because what we're hearing is that it's the beavers that actually exposed the fact that there had been overvoting. Yes, which is what the court hinged its ruling on. So if that's the case, then beavers worked as expected. And okay, so if you look at issues of network, for example, that is out of INEC's control. Even though my understanding is that the beavers can work independent of the network, because once you upload whatever you upload into it, it's already captured and stored there. And at any time the network now comes back up, what is stored there is still going to get uploaded to the portal anyway. So network failures don't automatically circumscribe beavers' ability. But I think
sorry to cut you short.
Go ahead.
You know, because you talked about this network, this issue came up before the election, and the INEC chairman said, look, he had spoken with all the major networks in the country.
Yes.
You know, all the major networks. I don't want to mention their names now, and that they gave him the assurance that things would work out well. But the truth is that, look, these networks could give you this assurance, even for some of us with our phones. Sometimes you see what happens with network.
Yes, I get asked on a daily basis which telephone network is better than which one, and I say none. They're all the same because they all fail sporadically, and one can be up today and that same one be down tomorrow. So the question is, for the networks to be given that kind of assurance, what they're saying is we will do our best, but even they are subject to certain conditions that are beyond their control. I'm sure the networks don't want any downtime themselves. But remember the terrain of our continent. The environment is physically harsh. The technology is spotty. And human factors also play a role. For example, the telephone networks, their base stations get vandalized, they get their diesel stolen. All kinds of things happen that are outside of their control, to where their networks get hit, even despite all the allocation to security to keep their networks intact. So, look, all we can do is put our best foot forward, make our contractual obligations with the networks, let INEC make its contractual obligations with those who print the ballot papers. Look, for example, the complaints yesterday that some parties didn't have their names, didn't have their logos. There were issues. So you put your best foot forward, you try to cover all the bases, but you should then hold accountable those who fail. So that there has to be a price to pay for failing to deliver as promised. So if it's INEC that has fallen down on the job, let us take INEC to task. Let INEC then take its contractors to task on the places where they failed individually, so that next time we're coming out, all these issues will already have been addressed.
In Adamawa State, we saw a collation center where there was no electricity supply. So it's difficult to believe that INEC would not have made some kind of contingency arrangement now to provide generator or something, and people were using their torchlights to collate results.
Yeah, well, even in the south, we've seen,
in that case, somebody has to be held responsible for that. It's difficult to believe that no provision would have been made.
Yeah, exactly, because I mean the fact that it's a part of the polling units that have been provided for the people.
This time, not even polling unit, but we're talking about collation center.
Oh, collation center. Yeah, you said so. Well, it's the same thing. It's an INEC facility. So when you put a facility in place, you put infrastructure in place so that that facility will be able to carry out its responsibility. And that also tells you that something obviously is wrong somewhere. Even if it's a small generator, whatever it is that you can provide for that purpose, or even rechargeable. But even if it's rechargeable, that means you also have to run a generator somewhere to also recharge lamps and all that. So I don't see, because there are innovative ways these things can be done. I mean, how many hours are we talking about? Maximum 24 hours if you're going to run all through the night, depending on when the people turned up. So what you do is you have these rechargeable lamps that can work hours. Get a small generator. I mean, for those areas, and I'm sure it's not just that location in Adamawa. There will be other places, such places like that. Make a budgetary provision for that, and so that for that period that they are going to be active, you get some of these lamps last for so long, and then let them 3, 4, 5 lamps in. I mean, we are not saying you must. There's no way they are going to get these electricity companies to draw power lines up to that place. So it's about innovation. What you're able to get together just for the purpose of the 2 days that that election is going to take place. So it's unbelievable. If you want to, ask INEC, what did you find? You obviously sent people there. You agreed that that was going to be a collation, point. So what exactly did you do to make sure that the place is adequately equipped? And so if the place was not adequately equipped, and the people that collation center did not discharge its responsibility in terms of proper collation, then who also do you hold responsible? INEC has to be held responsible, because INEC was in charge.
What do you think? How do you think we can? Because this issue of logistics has been a constant problem. What do you think? How do you think we can overcome it?
Well, I don't know. INEC, in terms of the vehicular logistics, INEC has had to use over the years the NURTW to carry out their logistics movements, and then some of these vehicles are subject to inspection by the Federal Road Safety Commission, COR. And it is only after that they certify them that INEC is able to use them. So what that means is that the possibility of a breakdown as a reason why these vehicles did not get to the appropriate places on time is removed, but obviously we keep on having these issues. But also don't forget, perhaps, maybe some bit of sabotage. Don't forget that some of these unions have very close synergy or affiliations with politicians. Politicians have a stake in this election. The unions, so if they give the right kind of signal, for instance, there's a possibility that in places where some political parties pose a threat, perhaps to the dominant political party in that particular area, they might influence these drivers not to get to those places on time. And so that if it does happen in that way, you could call it systematic disenfranchisement or suppression of votes. Because if you are not able to get people to come out to vote, it adds to the votes that you have in places where you are strong. So I'm not saying this is speculation. Do you understand? But nothing is impossible because these politicians can do, anything. I know that there was an arrangement by the INEC, for instance, in Lagos State that caused a bit of controversy, whether to use the garages and parks in Lagos. And eventually somebody, I think one of the parties had to go to court, and they got a court injunction or ruling that that process should be that they should put a stop to it. So within about 4 or 5 days that ruling took place, what exactly did INEC do? Did they go ahead to disobey the court order, or did they look for an alternative and that alternative disappointed because they didn't start that agreement, that discussion with them on time? We don't know. But don't forget, let us
we also don't know if there were issues of payment. We can't know.
No, we don't know. But one thing, and again, that would not be an excuse, because INEC had told us, the CBN had told us.
It's a different thing.
Exactly.
What they tell you might not.
But since they are going to account to us, we are the taxpayers, we are the people that are giving them money. The government is giving them money on our behalf. So we should hold them responsible. If the government does not hold them responsible directly, then we should call them out.
Anyway, let's go to. I think Tio Akatuba is now on the line. He wants to join us. Tio Akatuba is a political analyst. Theo, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and thank you for coming on the show. Now, give me your take on the conduct of the election so far.
Well, from the area that I monitored the election, I found that the election was predominantly peaceful, and there was no much event that affected the conduct of the election. I actually drove around, and I saw the high level of security presence on the roads leading to various areas where the polling units are located. I saw armed military men, I saw policemen, and I saw that even around the polling area where I voted, around the Omole Phase 1 area, we had a very large turnout of voters, very enthusiastic, and the Labour Party carried the day in that area, and there was no obstruction whatsoever. But the late arrival of the INEC official nearly marred the day, because they started coming in just close to 10 o'clock for something that should have started around 8:30. And we had a very large crowd of people already, and we saw that INEC officials were arriving. Some people arrived at about 11 o'clock for some of the polling units within the same area. And the polling areas, for some of them, have been changed. So there was a lot of, sometimes you see occasionally a number of people be running after some INEC official to go and create a temporal location for that polling unit to operate. And so that's what was, so up till the time of 6:30 was when, about 7 p.m. was when the last polling unit completed the activity in that area. So generally in this Agege area, or Ogba, or Mole, down to Agidingbi, to Ikeja, was quite peaceful from our observation.
Now, what do you think? I wouldn't know if you had any interaction at all with the INEC officials. What were the reasons they actually gave for arriving late?
Well, it was difficult asking them at that time, because the moment they arrived, what we needed them to do quickly was to set up. And so beginning to ask questions as to why they came late will be seen as even obstruction or delaying the process by the restive crowd. And so what we saw, some of them said that the vehicles that were going to move them arrived late. Others said that they did not exactly know the exact polling units. They had to locate it. Though I found that to be unacceptable, because this is a digital age. Even when I wanted to go to that polling place, that was my first time of voting there, because I had just transferred my polling unit from where I used to be to a new place. I got the direction right from the app, from the INEC website. Once my polling unit was identified, there was a directional button. Once I punched it, it drove me to the location. So I didn't accept that as an excuse. And also, another thing that I saw, I witnessed at the end of the polling and counting, announcement, and declaration of results, the INEC officials said they were able to upload 1 or 2 results, and they could not upload one of the 3 results. And I saw the crowd, the young people were restive, and I saw that they actually pounced on one of the vehicles conveying the INEC and said they must not leave until they had uploaded the results. I waited a little while to see how that was resolved, and it was getting into 7:30. But when I left that location, I didn't know how.
But the truth is that they could actually have a challenge with network, so so they may just not be able to upload the result. And it appears people don't really know how the beavers works. You know, the beavers captures the moment you've captured the result. Sometimes when there's no network, it does not upload automatically, even though it's stored in the beavers. And the truth is that after the election, result, of course, is declared at the polling unit, and each agent is given a copy of the signed results and all of that. So, but let's talk about the beavers itself. You must have heard complaints from some people. No doubt at all that from what I saw too, you know, you go to some polling units, you clearly could see that the INEC officials there could handle the beavers very well. They were very good at handling it. But there were some other polling units where the officials were not really good at handling the beavers. And you begin to wonder what kind of training they got. Because obviously, in some polling units where the officials were not good at handling the beavers and could not resolve issues that came up, it delayed the process. And that's the reason why you have situations where election would drag on late into the night in a number of places.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. But I'm sure they all got the same training. But all human beings have a learning approach. They have capacity to understand, and people have this differently. And because people have it differently, you will discover that the same, you train 10 people. That's the same reason why you take 10 people into a classroom. Some will perform better in an exam, and others will perform differently. So we can't blame the training, but we can blame the implementation of the knowledge that these people had. Some of them could be a bit adventurous and touch areas that they should not touch at that moment, and the beavers and the machine might behave and respond differently from their expectation. And because they are seeing maybe that performance or that activity or that reaction of the machine for the first time, they might be confused. It happens to us when we use our phones. You might have a phone you've been using for quite some time, and certain part of that phone you've not activated or you've not tampered with. The very first time you see it happen, you might even throw the phone into further difficulty. So that's my opinion, is that They got training, and INEC must have been sufficiently convinced that they are good to go and good to be on the field. And on getting to the field, some of them might misbehave. Some of them might even give it to a colleague who they thought has been properly oriented. So I saw that happen. There were a lot of times we had to intervene in helping them to understand, oh, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you, this way will be faster? Some other times we were adamant, and when they cooperated, things moved quite fast. But we kept insisting that the audience and the crowd should not pressure them to make mistakes.
All right, let me ask you this. We've seen, for instance, some of the political parties like Labour Party calling for the cancellation of election results in Rivers State. What's your take on that?
Well, they would have been able to see that. They would have been able to see that Ejura on the TV. I'm coming. I'm busy. Sorry for that interruption.
I can understand that
they must have a sufficient reason to have made this call. They have their situation room. They have their collations. And so I can't say anything because right now, I don't have details. I've been trying to follow Rivers, and I've not been able to get enough detail of the outcome of the election in that area. So I can't say much about what has happened there and why the Labour Party will be calling for a cancellation of the results.
That's quite true. Let's talk about turnout now. In 2003, I think that's the highest turnout we've ever had since 1999. Turnout in that election was 69%. With what you have seen and then going round as well, do you think we might match that number with this election?
Since the time that what's the name of the other machine, the smart card reader came into the fray, you've seen a systematic decline in number of turnout in our elections. Politicians have used the registered number of voters to generate figures in our elections. And when the smart card was introduced, we saw a decline. When the incident form was introduced, we saw a little upsurge. And it's been a decline consistently from 2015 to 2019. You see that the figures are going down. In this election, with the beavers, you are going to have even a further reduction when you begin to see the real numbers of the Nigerian voter. However, I expected a high number of turnouts, the number of enthusiasm, the kind of enthusiasm that the youth have brought into this campaign. I did not expect anything less. My thought, therefore, is what could be responsible for this low turnout? Could it be that during the registration, many of the young ones were registered away from their traditional residency, that when it came for election, they have been, they are very mobile young people, either for economic reasons, for social reasons, they move a lot. And so I have seen some young people telling me that I forgot my voter's card in Ajah. So there was a young man that was on the queue. He came to stand for his mother. He registered somewhere in Ajah, but on the election day, he's visiting his mother. I also called another young one who's currently just had a baby, and at the time of registration was not pregnant at the time, and now is now living somewhere else because of the situation she caused. So we see things like that could be responsible for low turnout, and also some may have traveled since the Japa syndrome had caught up with Nigerians. Some have gone for their master's degree. Some have also died, and so we have a lot of reasons why there could be low turnout. But the beavers is a game changer.
Achike, what do you think? Because yes, it's true. We just have to wait until everything comes out of INEC. That's when we'll be able to know what the turnout. But from what I saw yesterday in a number of polling units, turnout not as I had expected. When you look at the build-up to the election, the enthusiasm with which people registered and collected their PVCs and all of that.
Well, in the polling unit where I voted, that's somewhere in Bagada, surely, we had about 725 people registered. By the time I was leaving, after I had done my duties, about 120 people had voted, and we had about another 100 and maybe 30, estimate to 150, that were still waiting to vote. That was around 2 p.m. Again, I wish sure that everybody that came to vote, for instance, that they were all mocked up the day participate in voting, because if you had a situation where machines came to some places around 3 o'clock, some around 12, and then they started voting, there's a possibility that before 2:30, unless people were already in the queue, and they were quite resilient, because I know, for instance, that in Magodo there was a particular voting session that ended by 4 a.m. the following day, and people insisted that they were going to, So,
and let me surprise you. I mean, there were polling units I visited where voting ended as early as 11:45 a.m.
Yes, I also
a.m.
11:45
yes
a.m.
Yes, no, there was just no one. No one coming to.
No, yeah, we saw that even in some other parts of the country, and even in Abuja, there was a situation where you get to a polling center, there was just so many people, the crowd was so much, and then they just couldn't wait to get, to start doing the accreditation. And then they showed, another polling unit nearby that had nobody. And so, of course, there could be reasons for that. The fact that INEC, INEC had said that any polling unit that has as much as, I think, about 1,500 registered voters, that they are going to split and to make it easier for everybody.
Yes.
And then they moved them to another, other polling units. They did that in some cases. Some cases they failed. But in those places where it was done, a lot of people were kept in the dark. They didn't know where they were moved to. So they got to the usual polling unit that they know, only to be told that their names were not there. So they had to start looking for some other polling units around. Some found the polling units, some did not, and then went home. So when you look at the numbers, for instance, I was just telling some people the other time that if we can get as much as 40%, that would be about 6% increase on the last exercise.
Yes, exactly.
That it might still not be too fantastic, but at least it's an improvement, even if it's marginal. If we get 45, then I would say it is good, because I'm not anticipating that we'll have as much as 45, percent turnout for the president, or votes, cast for the presidential election. I will not say it has to do 100% with the number of people who did not turn up, but also the role that INEC officials, also played. I think that also played a part in terms of people, those who came early to the polling unit, and they had the beavers working very well. So all these things also contributed. But that is not to say that the number of voters that we were hoping we'll see, that we actually achieved that. Perhaps we did not. But then if we can get 40, 45, especially 45, then that's progress. The very next time, hopefully we should be able to do much more than that. But I think what is critical is that we must not forget the fact that we have always accused these youths of not being involved in the things that have to do with their country. We must not forget where we are coming from. They were completely showing apathy in anything that had to do with political discourse and all that. And then you now had NSAS, and all of a sudden the orientation of Nigerian youth changed, and they began to channel it to Twitter and social media, where they began to make political commentary and began to engage. Whether people would say that they engaged negatively or positively, but they were engaging in politics. So you have a group of young people that are becoming more and more conscientized, and that is good for the polity, because the more they can ask questions, the more that they engage, the more they put the politicians in charge of this country, they put them in an uncomfortable situation to respond to the needs and the yearnings, of the younger generation.
Now, look, the election has happened. We're waiting for the results of the election, and we just can't say much. We can't say too much about this election. I'd want us now to, can we just begin to set the agenda? Because I believe in the next few days we would know who the winner of the election is, and of course by May, well, we would have a new president. Let's set the agenda for the incoming president, and let me begin with you, Dio. What do you think should be the key priorities that the next administration should tackle from day one?
I don't think it should be any different from the three pillars that the outgoing administration came in promising to address. Number one, of course, is security. Number two is the economy. And number three is corruption. I think those three issues are pivotal and continue to bedevil this country. I think the outgoing administration came in on a promise of change with those three components specifically in its view. Well, it will get its report card when the results of this election come out. We'll have a better picture as to how Nigerians feel about whether they achieve their objectives in terms of those three pillars. I would say
if Nigerians actually voted on the basis of the performance of the current government,
a very big if.
That's debatable.
It is debatable indeed. But I would say that those three issues still continue to plague us as a people and still need more governmental attention. Insecurity still rages, whether it's the cow herder farmer crisis, whether it is terrorists, Boko Haram, whether it is banditry in the southeast, in areas of the north. There's even still militancy in the Niger Delta. I think security is far and away the number one problem that bedevils the country till today. And granted that the outgoing administration did a lot to fight it, spent a lot of money on the military in terms of equipment, in terms of terms and conditions of the military's working conditions, in terms of emoluments for their personnel, training and things like that. But they've still not been able to fully arrest. In spite of gains against some of the terrorists and banditry, they've not been able to fully arrest it to where up till now, there are still many Nigerians who do not feel secure in their homes. Over Christmas, many could not travel to their hometowns over the festive period. So insecurity is still a major problem. It truncates our ability to have a good quality of life.
Insecurity, of course, no doubt,
yes.
a very big issue.
Absolutely.
Theo, let me get your own, what would be your own take on this? I mean, if you were to set the agenda for the incoming government, what do you think the government should start tackling from day one?
And foremost is to reconcile the country and reach out to the parties that have lost in the election and try to assure them that there is no winner, there is no vanquished, no one defeated. We are all winners. It's been a democratic practice where we are exchanging ideas. Secondly, the president must hit the ground running to reach out to the youth. For the youths have been revved up and they are expecting a better life. They want a better country. Whoever wins should deliver that to ensure that our youth have a sense of belonging, have an enabling environment where if a young man is economically disadvantaged, he should know where to go or how to move. We should engineer creation of employment, catalyze entrepreneurship, find resources. These issues will help to douse the security tension that could be in the system. We have made so much progress on the area of security, and it has to be sustained. And so we must reduce our youth's inclination towards drug abuse. We must reduce our youth's inclination towards gambling, towards expectation of miraculous breakthroughs. They should be able to change the youth's mindset towards, actual work that produces actual products or actual services. So these are the things I recommend the president to do on day one.
Achike.
Yeah, I think the politics are very toxic. And
toxic.
Yes, and I think I would want, any president that comes in to look at how to actually begin the process of healing the wounds in the country, unifying the country. Obviously, it has security implications, really. I would want a president that also looks at the fact that we cannot continue to do things the way we have done them and then expect a different result. And that means that it needs to begin to look at the need to restructure the polity in ways that will be beneficial to all the component groups and the federating units in the country. We talk about economic restructuring, where you have about 70-something items on the exclusive list. The federal government does not need to have that when you have federating units. So these are key things that deregulate, some of the responsibilities of government, take them, give them back to the states, and make sure that you put in structures to monitor the activities, of those states because of the possibility, of abuse. Then you begin, when you're able to do that, you begin the process of governance in so many ways. How are you going to everything that we talk about, whether it's fighting insurgency, security, and so on, is going to need resources. Where are you going to get these resources from?
And that's
you are paying about 80 to 90% of the country's budget, using it to service debt. So you have a monumental challenge for anybody that's going to take over the reins of government in this country. So you need a government that is innovative, that has a sense of vision, and will be able to look for ways to be able to generate these resources without killing the people, the citizens who are almost already dead in the process.
All right. We know that, look, governorship election, that's gubernatorial election now, will be coming up in, is it in 2 weeks' time? What I say to people, Dio, is that, look, as far as I'm concerned, and that is my own opinion, I think the gubernatorial election is even, for me, more important than the presidential election, because whoever becomes the governor of my state has, more, his action or inaction would have, more consequence on me. Okay, I'm being told to call for a short break now. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back to continue this discussion, because I think it's very important we talk about the coming governorship election. So we'll take a short break now, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, let's quickly go to Abuja, where we have Festus Okoye, who is the National Commissioner of INEC on Voter Education. He is right there at the National Collation Center. And Mr. Okoye, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you for joining us on the program. Very quickly now, of course, the INEC chairman has said the collation will begin at about 6 p.m. Tell us exactly what is happening. What information are you getting from across the states? Are the results coming in now?
Yes, the trajectory of the electoral process demands that the moment we are done with elections at the polling unit level, those elections, the results, that is the Form EC8A, together with the accreditation data, will be uploaded into our INEC Result Viewing portal. That same result will also be transferred. The manual result will also be transferred from the polling unit together with the beavers to the first level of collation, which is the registration area collation center. In most of the states of the Federation, that process has been completed. Then from the registration area collation center, it moves to the local government collation center. In a number of the states of the Federation, that collation has been completed, and some of them are at the level of the state collation center as at now. I think the chairman has an assurance that there's a possibility that by the time we reconvene at 6 p.m. today, that we will at least have one state of the Federation that has completed the process of collation at the state level. So the state collation officer for the presidential election, together with the resident electoral commissioner for that particular state, we come to the National Collation Center here and present the results, the state results relating to the presidential election to the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, who is the chief electoral commissioner for the Federation, and the returning officer for the presidential election. So that is the process that we commence at 6 p.m. But the chairman at 1 p.m. today declared the National Collation Center open. What that means is that the National Collation Center is now ready to receive results of the presidential election from all the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory. So that is where we are as at now.
Now, there had been reports of challenges with uploading results from the polling units now to the INEC server. I mean, there were reports of your officials now not being able to upload these results. At some point, everyone was complaining that, you know, they went to the IREV site and they just could not get the results. What exactly was the problem? What was the challenge?
Well, I cannot, in good conscience, tell you what the problem is. But all I know is that as at yesterday, I went to the INEC Result Viewing portal and the results were coming in. And at this morning, I also checked the INEC Result Viewing portal and the results were coming in. But I have received reports and information that there are a few people, or some people are finding it very difficult to log in, and that some people have also complained that some of the results were coming in and going out. So I don't know what the technical issues are. I don't know what the technical details are. But the moment I get back to our situation room, I will ask the IT people and those who are in charge of the portal whether we have challenges. And if we have challenges, I want to find out the nature of those challenges and what they have done in relation to remedying those challenges. So I'm slightly deficient when it comes to the issue of technology. So I'm going to go and ask the experts so that I will have a good information relating to what is going on, and so that I can pass that information to the public.
Let's quickly talk about the logistics challenge we have seen. You know, in some states, of course, you had to reschedule elections because there are cases where election materials and your officials, of course, did not arrive polling units in good time. What exactly is the logistics challenge you're having? Because even today, with the rescheduled elections, we've received reports from places like Cross River and even in some other places of election materials and INEC staff not arriving polling units on time.
There are concerns relating to some of the challenges we had mobilizing to the polling units in some parts of the country. Generally speaking, in most parts of the country, we did deploy and we did deploy on time. But there were a few states where we had some challenges. There are some states where some of the transporters we engaged in terms of the drivers backed out at the last moment on grounds of security challenges, and some of them even backed out on grounds that we needed to pay them more for them to go to places that have security challenges. There were also some places where we had significant challenges getting core members to mobilize to certain areas, and also getting our APO 1, 2, and 3 to go to certain areas. But there were also a few places where we couldn't mobilize on time out of our own making. So we are not offering excuses in relation to some of these issues. If there are lessons to be learned, we have learned valuable lessons from this election, and we still have elections in front of us. So what the Commission will do is to quickly review what has happened during this presidential election, especially in the areas where we have logistic challenges, and then overcome the challenges, and then move on with the electoral process, because we want Nigerians to remain engaged with this process. We want Nigerians to have trust in the ability of the Independent National Electoral Commission to conduct free, fair, transparent, and verifiable election. And so we are not leaving anything to chance. We know that there were challenges. We acknowledge those challenges. Some of those challenges were due to infrastructural issues in the country. Some of them were due to security challenges. Some of them were due to geographical challenges in terms of terrain, and some of them were also due to our own failings and our own making. We are taking all of them on board, and we are going to recalibrate and then retool our processes and overcome all these challenges and problems.
Now, in the past, we often heard of ballot box snatching. Now we're hearing of beaver snatching. Now, for those areas where beavers were snatched, what exactly happens? Does it invalidate the election that has taken place there? Because, and are you surprised that you know, your beavers machines are coming on the target? They're coming on the target. People are snatching them.
No, we are really not surprised because the beavers is the ultimate game changer, is the ultimate arbiter, and also is the nightmare of election riggers. So since carrying of ballot boxes and ballot papers are no longer fashionable, since they have no electoral value anymore, people are now targeting the beavers, which is the game changer. And since they are targeting the beavers, we keep on improving on the technology of the beavers, so that the moment you move the beavers from one location to the other, it is automatically demobilized and it becomes useless to you, even if you snatch it. So we are doing something about the beavers. But I believe that ultimately, we must begin to name and shame those who do not believe in the electoral process. We must begin to develop and cultivate the democratic spirit that allows us to allow the rule of law and due process to prevail. That is the only way our electoral process will develop, and that is the only way we can continue to sustain our democracy. We cannot sustain our democracy through fraud. We cannot sustain our democracy when those who are supposed to believe in the rule of law and have fidelity of the rule of law violate the intent of the law, violate the intent of the constitution, and also use extrajudicial and extra-constitutional means to get to power. That cannot advance our democracy, and that cannot advance our electoral process.
Let me ask you one final question, because I know you're in a hurry. You must have seen results that are flying all over the social media. People are just, pasting different results, and they all claim these results are from INEC. What have you got to say about that?
I just want to plead to Nigerians, to our compatriots, to exercise patience and exercise caution and be circumspect in posting election results, in order not to inflame passion, and also in order not to give Nigerians a wrong impression that results have come in. If you look at Section 25 of the Electoral Act, it is the Independent National Electoral Commission is the only commission that has the ultimate right, the power, and the responsibility of making a declaration and also making a return. And I also want to say that it is against the law and an electoral infraction for anybody to post any result that is not right, that is not accurate, or that is fake. So let us be circumspect in terms of what we are doing, in order not to inflame passion, and also in order not to create the condition for a breakdown of law and order when the commission ultimately declares the authentic results in relation to various levels of election.
Some of the political parties have been asking that INEC should cancel results in some states, Rivers State particularly. We've had the Labour Party saying INEC should cancel the results in Rivers State. Have you got anything to say about that?
We don't cancel results arbitrarily. At the level of the polling unit, if there's an overvoting at a polling unit, it is the responsibility of the presiding officer to cancel such a result. If a presiding officer has been prevented from deploying, that presiding officer is supposed to fill a certain form, which the presiding officer takes to the first level of collation and hands over to the registration area collation officer, and then it goes on and on. And so our electoral process is based on procedure, is based on process. And if you also look at Section 65 of the Electoral Act, if, for instance, a declaration and a return has been made under duress or not made in accordance with the law and the regulations and guidelines of the commission has been given a period of 7 days to review that declaration, review that particular return, and take a decision. And so various things we do and decisions we take and actions we take are based on the Constitution and also based on the law.
Overall, how would you rate your performance in this election?
I will rather allow Nigerians to rate our performance, but I believe that within the context of the trajectory of the Nigerian Federation, we have done very well in terms of making sure that this election is not postponed, and also in terms of making sure that our election materials get to site and get to location on time. Yes, we acknowledge that there were challenges in a few states of the Federation, but on the whole, this commission has done well, and we are still going to continue to learn valuable lessons in order to proceed with the electoral process and continue to give Nigerians a very good voting experience.
Festus Okoye, National Commissioner now, Voter Education, thank you very much for coming on the show, and thank you for talking to us. Well, that's Festus Okoye, the National Commissioner on Voter Education of the Independent National Electoral Commission. I still have Achike Chude here. Achike, you want to react to some of the things he said?
Well, Festus Okoye, I think is somebody, that has the capacity to sell snow to an Eskimo. You know, he's been quite an invaluable asset to
yes, exactly,
to INEC, and so I think that sometimes.
And when it comes to election issues,
yes, he's grounded, and so
his activities as a TMG chairman,
exactly. So you need to prepare very well to try to catch him unawares. You know, but again, perhaps that should not be the focus. He understands his onions. That's what I say. Yeah, he has said, you know, quite a few things about what is going on. I think the good thing about what he said is acknowledgement, acceptance of some failure, you know, on the part of INEC. They are going to review some of the things that have gone on to know exactly
because we have another round of election
exactly, to know what happened, so that they can look for a way to you know, make sure that it does not happen again. Perhaps they need to also begin to look at other organizations that have, you have the NURTW, if the failure is essentially from them, but there are some things he said that are true. Security-prone areas. Yes, people, even when you have ad hoc staff that want to go there, their parents and guardians do not want them to go there and expose themselves unnecessarily. That is really true. We've had instances, I think, before the INEC, you know, the election in Anambra State, where on the eve of the election, a night before the election or so, they were waiting for the transporters. They didn't show up. So what do you do at that particular point?
Some transporters asking for extra money to go to some
blackmail, sheer blackmail. You know, that after they had already agreed. Areas, so these are some of the issues. So we must acknowledge some of those ones. But then not every part of Nigeria is security prone. What of those areas that are relatively peaceful, that we had the same logistics challenges? So these are the things that they also have to look at. Perhaps they might need to begin to look at taking, you know, consulting or having to engage some of these Uber riders instead of the NURTW. They have fresher vehicles, they have, but if you see the kind of vehicles that are being used to convey some of these materials, they are decrepit.
Yes.
You know, I saw some of them, and so when they tell us that, look, road safety is going to certify certify what? I saw them, so I think they are really operating from the prism of not having any choice. So some of these Uber, you know, riders or drivers are already registered within, you know, either the NLC or the TUC. So it's an organized union at this particular point in time. And like I said, their vehicles are in fairly good condition and they are in their numbers. So maybe it's one way of looking at, you know, possibly looking for a way to stop some of these logistic problems.
Dio, let me get your take on some of the issues that the INEC spokesperson raised.
Very well on behalf of the Commission. He's a good spokesperson for the Commission. I like the fact that he acknowledged that INEC is responsible for some of the failures. I also thought that he tooted the trumpet of the agency by saying that, well, give us credit for the fact that we didn't postpone this election, which has happened the last 2 times we did this, and that despite all of the challenges in the run-up to yesterday, they were still able to stay on course and carry out that election. And that when it's all said and done, in spite of the failures, the lapses, the shortcomings, they still got the election done. That where the lapses were an infinitesimal proportion of the whole, and that they will resolve those places that had problems and be able to give Nigerians an accurate, credible outcome in the upcoming hours or days. I do think that they do need to go back and look at some of the lapses. I like Achike's suggestion about using more modern transportation like Uber. The only challenge with that is Uber is only in like 3 or 4 Nigerian cities. It doesn't extend in many states. Uber is not existent, and they ultimately still have to rely on decrepit vehicles and unreliable drivers who will fail you at the last minute or blackmail you for more money despite an existing arrangement. So it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The whole issue needs to be revamped to rely less on human intervention and more on technology. I'm glad he has said they will review We have another election coming up in 2 weeks. And what are the things they need to do to cure the lapses that are evident in yesterday's election, particularly the timely arrival of material and personnel? How do we make sure that 8:30 is when the election will start, and by 2:30 it will be done? What do they need to do to make that happen? We look forward to INEC having a better showing in the next election in 2 weeks.
I wouldn't know if we still have Theo Akatuba, and if he listened to the INEC spokesperson now. Do we still have Theo Akatuba? Oh, okay, I understand Theo Akatuba. Now, let's, just before we wrap up, let's quickly talk about the elections coming up in 2 weeks' time. That's the gubernatorial and State House of Assembly election. How important are these elections? Personally, I consider them, the most important.
Yeah, let's even talk about, before we even get to that, let's consider the fact that a particular candidate emerges president of this country. I think that would have that would have some influence on the kind of bandwagon effect that would affect the fortunes of his political party. I think that...
you think we may have a bandwagon effect?
Yeah, there will be some effect. Because if anybody from
You don't think the voters are mature enough to discern and say, look, yes, we voted you for president, it really doesn't matter, but that we can vote a different political party for the governorship?
I think an answer to that, you had already given it when Dayo made a statement about what the voters should be, about the testimony, what kind of result, what kind of judgment that the voters would make about the current performance of the present government. And you did retort, that is if you did say something like that is if the voters are voting, along that line. So it's clear that our democracy has not gotten to a level where the voters have, because the voters need some level of sophistication.
That is true.
To also understand all of the issues. Because if our voters were that sophisticated, the issue of vote buying and vote selling would not be, the problem that it has become in the polity. But regardless of that, I tend to think that if a particular party emerges winner of the presidential election, it could discourage in two ways. It would encourage more supporters of that party to come out, basking in the euphoria of the victory, and discourage others who are disappointed by the outcome of that result. So that might end up giving more votes.
But that would also be dangerous for any party. If a party loses and then the supporters of that party get discouraged, they don't show up, they are putting their party in danger.
Obviously, there's no doubt about that. And then it is also not good for our democracy. You need to have this plurality of opposition, but beyond that, you are asking about, the importance of I agree. Look, this statement, from time to time, even not beyond even the governors, even local government level, it's just that local governance in this country has been deliberately emasculated by the political class at both the central level of government and at both the state level. That shows you also the hypocrisy of the political class. They want some level of freedom and more powers from the center, but are not willing to devolve some of these powers that they have from the state, command structure down to the local government level. So it is critical. And I think what has been lacking in our democracy is this continuous focus on the center as the beginning and the end of all our problems. So if there's a problem, for instance, it's the president, the economy is not good and so on. We know that there are certain, things, responsibilities and powers that the president has. But you can imagine citizens across the 33 states.
The governors have direct impact on your life as a
putting
citizen.
Pressure on governance. You realize that whatever they do has the capacity to touch almost immediately the lives of the people that they govern in their states. So it is key. We have looked away from this, and that's why a lot of the governors have been misbehaving. So if you look at even whether you're talking about corruption, you're talking about other forms of abuse of government powers, you realize that we've had much more abuse at the state level, all over the country than what we have at the federal. It's just that all eyes are focused on the federal. So we must, if we want to improve our lives much more significantly, then we must put pressure on the state governments to do what they need to do. There are roads to be constructed. There are local roads, state roads, local government roads, markets to clean up and all that. Because this, like you you said, these are the things that touch. We wake up every day and we walk along,
exactly.
you know, roads that belong to the state government, full, you know, dirty and all that, insecurity, you know. So we don't need to keep on looking all the way at Sokoto, because what we need, the solution is in the Sokoto that we're wearing, and that is the state government. So it is very, very important.
Dio, let me get your take on this.
You will see that there's been scant interest in the State House of Assembly elections, and that generally telegraphs the notion that everybody's focused on the center. The kind of passion and enthusiasm that's been directed towards yesterday's election or at the national level is not nearly as vibrant as that of the state. And yet, as Achike rightly said, the state government has greater impact on our daily lives.
Yes.
Actually, the local government should be the closest to the people, but as he rightly identified, it's been so emasculated that it is basically a toothless bulldog. But with an ineffective local government, then all of our hopes now redound on the state government. Yes, and so this next upcoming election is actually more pivotal. It's more relevant to our daily lives than what we did yesterday. The problem, of course, in terms of the presidential election has already occurred. So you voted for somebody in one party for the presidency. Now assume you have a different preferred candidate for the for governorship and for State House of Assembly. The ballot papers make it a bit difficult for those who are unlettered or those who are not sophisticated to be able to vote one party for presidential, a different party.
I think you have a point there. I think you have a point there.
Absolutely, a different party. So invariably what happens is that confusion sets in and you end up doing the wrong thing all the way around because you're trying to cherry pick. One for presidency, a different one for Senate, a different one for governor. And because the ballot papers show only the parties, I would venture to say that a large proportion of the Nigerian electorate is either unlettered or unsophisticated. Yeah. And by the time they start trying to differentiate between the different parties, I think the most straightforward thing is to just vote the same party all the way down the line. But because of the divisions that the political parties have created within various interest groups and the polity, it makes it very difficult to be unified in your interest in terms of who represents you at the different levels. So yes, next, the election upcoming in 2 Saturdays is critical. I would even prefer to see a larger turnout for the governorship, the gubernatorial, and the State House of Assemblies than we saw for yesterday's election. And I hope it does work out that way. I don't know if the youth, who seem to be the game changer in this election,
understand this.
That whole, I don't know if they understand it, because that whole NSAS movement that brought them out of their slumber, that was directed at the center. Okay, the police is federal. We want to reform the police. We want you to get rid of SARS. That's what brought the youth out of its slumber. And so I think their energies are more focused towards the center. I don't see that passion coming from the youth for the individual 36 government houses. I don't see it, and it is worrisome because it might mean that there won't be as much interest or as much participation in the governorship elections in 2 weeks' time, and there just might be a bandwagon effect that, oh, so-and-so has already won the presidential, so be it.
Yeah, and I think Dio made a lot of points, seriously, because there was something that he also talked about that verges on the ideological compass of some of these political parties. For instance, you see, under normal circumstances, if parties are driven by ideology, then it's only given that when you vote for the president, you're voting for the Senate, you're voting, the senator, you're voting for House of Reps, you're voting for the local, you're voting for maybe State House of Assembly and the governor, because they all share the same ideological vision, and so you have already looked at a lot of things, and then you are also propelled by certain understanding and certain ideological beliefs, whether you are a conservative, whether you're a liberal, whatever it is, that those who are serving, are running on behalf of your, or in the name of your political party, are doing it because they have imbibed a particular ideological orientation that is similar to yours. And so you don't need to begin to look at Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C. Obviously, Mr. B has a different ideology from yours, so that would have helped a lot. And I also agree too, by the time the election comes in, we're going to see whether the angst of the youth really is directed towards the federal government, or whether it is something that is all-embracing.
All-embracing.
Yeah.
Because people must understand that, these governors actually have more impact on our lives than a distant center. I understand Theo Akatuba is back now. Theo, earlier we had the INEC spokesperson. Now that's the INEC's National Commissioner on Voter Education. I'm not too sure you listened to him. Did you?
I listened attentively.
What have you got to say about some of the issues he talked about?
Yeah, Festus Okoye has always been someone who is very, verbose. There's so much he brings out, and he has endeared himself to the heart of the people over time with the clarity with which he attempts to illuminate all the subjects, matters that are brought before him. I think he enlightens the hearts and the mind about the procedures, about the activities. But what I am not comfortable with is always this idea that there are the media houses that are worth their salt, media houses that are licensed in this country to carry out broadcasting at this stage of 2023. We should have confidence in them enough to be able to release the same result that has been released at polling units and posted on the wall. That result has been made public. They also can have their situation room and project this election. There's a lot of interest when you watch, as I'm watching 360. 360 is able to say polling unit this has just released their result. That is the drama that I find in Ghana election, and that by the time the results are to be released, the citizens have already have an idea of where the pendulum is swinging, and there is less tension when the INEC or the Electoral Commission is just to what you call give official stamp on what has been collated by every Tom, Dick, and Harry from the results that have emanated from the polling units. I believe that our election, we should give much freedom to the media houses. If that happens, the idea that someone is going to manipulate my figures secretly will be completely taken out of the system, because different media houses will be collating at the same time as INEC and all the other officials and the political parties are collating. It brings a lot of interest. In fact, it makes it more exciting.
That is hoping that it will not be subject to abuse as well.
Yes. So
that is hoping that what you're saying would not be subject to abuse.
On that.
Let me quickly ask you this. We have governorship election coming up in 2 weeks' time. How important do you think these elections are?
The governorship election is
even more
supposed
serious
to be the most important election in our electoral calendar. Unfortunately, over the years, the governors have attempted to divert the attention of their citizens to blame the person at the federal level as being responsible for all their challenges. I've always had the argument that if governors do perform 50% of the responsibility that the Constitution has given to them, the issue of unemployment will be drastically reduced.
Exactly.
The issue of insecurity will almost be confined to the dustbin, because every crime takes place in a state, every crime takes place in a local government, every crime takes place in a ward. So with state governors performing their roles adequately, Nigeria will develop from the flanks and there will be less pressure at the center. This is why if the governors can live a bit responsibly, devolution of power will be much more easier, because as you can see, if governors are not oppressive of opponents, it will be easy to allow state police to come in. But if governors behave like emperors, sometimes you will need a bit of check over them. That's why you see the issue of state police have dragged on and on without easy resolution. If state governors create employment, let's say they do 1,000 jobs a month, that would be 36,000 a month across the country. And if that is replicated on a monthly basis, I can assure you the issue of unemployment will be reduced, and that unnecessary migration across Nigeria will be reduced. And this country will begin to develop using the talents available to it. And then look at the autonomy of local government. The governors, they dread a local government in the hand of their opponent or opposing political party. But they find it easy to oppose the president at the center when this president has given them the level of autonomy they enjoy. They don't want to bequeath that to the local government. And once we are not able to do that, development from the flank will be difficult because local governments are empowered. The government will be very close to the people. They will know who to go to. They will know who to speak to on issues. But today, someone in Oshimili local government is angry. He doesn't know where to go within the locality. He simply blames the president who is in Abuja.
And that is quite true. It's quite true, you know.
Yes,
because sometimes I wonder what the woman who sells akara somewhere in Zamfara, for instance, what has that woman in one very local place? What has a woman got to do with who the president is? The woman should be more concerned with who the local government chairman is, or probably who the governor is. But unfortunately, the governors have been hiding under the radar, and you know, they push everything to the center.
I think to a very large extent, you know, the civil society organizations too have also shown, been responsible to some extent, because they are the ones that are supposed to be more enlightened and aware on the nuances of governance and the expectations of citizens, you know, from government and the government officials. And so you find out that the activities of even civil society organizations have also been geared, you know, towards what happens at the federal level too. And I think they are the ones that have, you know, a lot of job to also try to enlighten some of the citizens. You find out that, in a way, places where you have a bigger, you know, cities like Lagos. Lagos tends to enjoy, to some extent, the activities of civil society, you know, organizations and
in states
and
that are considered rural,
exactly.
rural
And so I think the Lagos State sometimes respond to public criticism from you know, either public affairs analysts, civil society organization, and then the media organizations. But in the states, especially in certain states in this country, it is absolutely abysmal. The criticism of government is seen as an aberration. You know, and when you do that, when you summon the courage to do that, people are looking at you as if you are risking your life. And that is because, that phenomenon of actually speaking out is unknown to such people. And so we need to also change that narrative, you know, and that's the only way you can actually begin to get the governors to sit up, because they are much bigger emperors. And that's why I agree also with what you said. I have looked by my you know, training, by my experience as a civil society activist, I should be one of those campaigning for state police. You know, so that you devolve it from the center. But I'm also aware that perhaps it is better to have one central madman than to have 36 mad people plus one. You know, because there are certain governors today, I don't want to mention names, that you just, you know, talk about and you just think of. Already, even without state police, we can see that they have become terror in their enclaves. Give them state police and you are going to see what they're going to do with it. So it becomes exceedingly very dangerous to even contemplate that. But it is a bridge that we have to cross one of these days, because the insecurity we have faced in this country is unprecedented. So if you have that, I think the major issue is the issue of control. And, you know, and somebody had said that, look, are you going to, as an out of fear, not do what you should do? But we have also learned from the history of our country, the fact that today we are talking about a faulty foundation being responsible for where we are. So if you're talking about, you know, this, then the control also has to come even with the policy itself. So there's an effective control that takes it away, the power over the state police, away from even the control by the governor of a state. Otherwise, all of us, I'll just leave the studio. And that maybe it's because the federal government, you know, is so far from here that some of us can say the kind of things we say about our president. Even now, the present president and the past president. You say what you want to say now about a governor. As you get outside of the gates, you're going to know that, there are certain things you don't say in certain states in this country. And that's what we need to avoid.
Dio, let me get your final word before we close.
I think all this is speaking to this notion of restructuring, to where we take away more powers from the center and devolve them to the states, whether it's state police, whether it's being responsible for generating your own revenue and paying a tax to the center. I think the discussion and the narrative now is revolving more around how do we create a better life for Nigerians by having governance closer to the people. How do we do it in such a way
that's what will make the difference for us?
Absolutely, but giving credit to what Achike said, how do we structure it in such a way that prohibits abuse of power? That is a real worry, that you give, the governors are already tin gods. They're already tin gods in their own little enclaves. Yeah. So all of a sudden you now vest them with so much more power. How do you keep them in check? But that is for us to sit at a negotiating table and discuss. We have enough thinkers and enough eggheads who can put together a workable solution for where, look, at the end of the day, we all want a better Nigeria. We want the Nigeria of our dreams. We want a good quality of life. The things we're asking for, they are not that onerous to provide. Yeah. We want good schools. We want to be secure in our homes. We want good health care. We want jobs. We want to know that when we turn on the light, there will be, we turn on the switch, there will be light. We open the taps, there will be water. That is not too much. Simple, the basic things. That is not too much to ask in a resource-rich country like Nigeria. I think and hope that this election will begin to turn things around to lead us in that direction.
Theo, let me get your final word before I close.
Thank you very much for being here, my brother Chuke. Fantastic. Nice to see you today.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I was also telling myself the same thing too. Yeah, about you.
Yeah, let me close by saying that Nigeria is work in progress. And there is no nation on earth, no matter how perfect or advanced their system have become, where you have nothing to complain about. If you go down to Canada, there are still issues that are being resolved. And we must begin to trust our systems. We must begin to find a solution to all the causes of agitation so that let's have more robust discussions one another. That's one very important currency. I saw that at the polling unit. There's so much mistrust, that a little move, everyone start making, everyone just goes haywire. And it's not very healthy for any nation. If we have visitors around us, they would think that we are not a people that are deserving of development and progress. Development comes from trust. Development comes from unity and standing for one another. So finally, let us concentrate. A lot of people have voted for House of Rep members they do not know. A lot voted for senators they do not know. They only voted because they have voted for that party for presidency. They just voted along those lines. It's a very dangerous thing to have a good president and have senators that are of less quality, or have great lawmakers and have a president that of a lower quality. I think for governorship, let us find out who are the House of Rep members. Let's be sure we find out that before the election.
House of Assembly member,
you mean? Very careful choice of governors is very important. Thank you.
I'm very sure you meant House of Assembly members, but thank you very much. Gentlemen,
House of Assembly members.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for your time. Dayo Akintobi, political affairs analyst, thank you very much for coming on the program. You've been very wonderful. You stayed with us all through. Achike Chude, thank you very much. We all pray for a better Nigeria, and let's just hope that this electoral process would actually help to change things in this country. And of course, Theo Akatuba, thank you so very much. Well, I think this is where we're going to draw the curtain, but then we are still going to stay on, of course, the collation of results in Abuja. As soon as we get any update at all, we're going to bring that to you. But for now, it's bye-bye. I'll see you next time.